Hi there, it's Alexandra from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and it's the April garden tour. And there's been a complete turnaround in the weather. In February and most of March, we had the wettest weather that we'd had since records began. But the last few weeks have been really quite dry, getting warmer, although there have been some frosts, and there's been quite a sharp wind which has really dried everything out. Today, for example, we're expecting temperatures to go up to 20 Celsius, and that's about 68 Fahrenheit. So that's the hottest day we've had so far, but it's regularly been in the 9s and 10s Celsius, which is about in the 50s Fahrenheit. So I've had to top up the mini wildlife pond, and wildlife ponds need to be topped up with rainwater from water butts, preferably not from the tap, although you can leave the water from the tap in a watering can to sit around for a few hours so that some of the chemicals evaporate off. I think the blossom from the fruit trees has been the main story for the last few weeks. The first fruit trees to blossom in this garden are Prunus ceracifera nigra, or the ornamental black cherry plum, and then the white blossom of the snow goose ornamental cherry. Both these trees are brilliant trees for small gardens because they have a very upright vase shape, and because they come out, the blossom comes out so early, they're brilliant for early pollinators. If there's a sunny day, the bees seem to wake up and they seem to absolutely love these trees. Next come the pear trees, both the ornamental pear trees and the pear trees you grow for fruit you can eat. And this one in garden designer Posy Gentle's garden is really pretty. The pear trees blossom seems to come out earlier than the apple trees. But if you're thinking of planting a pear tree in your garden and you want fruit, it's worth remembering that it does need another pear tree of a suitable variety nearby to act as a pollinator. The same goes for apple trees, but of course we have many more apple trees in our gardens and bees fly for miles. So there's a very good chance if you've just got one apple tree in your garden that it will be pollinated by a suitable nearby apple tree somewhere not too far away from you. But fewer people grow pear trees, so this is less likely to happen. Good pear tree growers will actually tell you which varieties you need to plant near each other for pollinating. And also both apple trees and pear trees have self-fertile or self-pollinating varieties. However, the RHS says that even the self-pollinating varieties are usually better. You'll get a better harvest if you've got a suitable pear or apple growing within pollinating distance. It's a bit too late in April to plant bare root fruit trees, but you can plant potted up fruit trees at any time. So you can still plant a fruit tree in your garden now, but just be aware that it'll need more water during the summer. You'll need to keep watering it certainly through its first summer until its roots develop. Then in this garden, the crabapple trees are next, and they're only just coming out. I'm seeing the first few blossoms from crabapple red sentinel, which is an absolutely lovely garden tree. And I'll probably have to wait another couple of weeks before the front garden, which is a crabapple called Malus hupahensis, comes out, and that's a lovely white blossom. And once again, Malus hupahensis has got a very nice vase, upright vase shape, which makes it particularly good for small gardens, particularly in its first 10 years. It starts to spread a bit outwards after that, but that makes it a very good choice for small gardens because you don't get too much shadow around the base, and it could also be a very good choice as a privacy tree because it will help shield your windows. And while we're talking about good garden trees for blossom, I must mention Amelanchier. Amelanchier lamarckii is a beautiful garden tree. I've got two in my garden, my neighbours have got some, and there's also some in this front garden designed by garden designer Posy Gentles. And I think here it looks like the most charming equivalent to net curtains. It's just a dotting of blossom and the light can come into the room between the branches, and it's just so pretty. Amelanchiers don't grow very fast, so they're a very good tree for small gardens, and they don't get too tall. There's a lot of them in the genus, so you would have to check which particular Amelanchier you were planting. But certainly lamarckii, which we've got here, hasn't grown very fast and it hasn't grown very tall, and I really think it's a pretty garden tree. An early flowering shrub can also be a wonderful thing in a small garden, and I particularly love this ornamental blackcurrant flowering now in Posy Gentle's garden. It's got a lovely sort of pinky rosy flushed flower, and that looks so good with the emerging foliage that you get of things like roses and peonies at the moment. The emerging foliage, I think, is a wonderful thing in gardens at the moment. And while last month's garden was all about daffodils, I'm now going around snipping off the heads just at the top, because you want to leave most of the stem so that the nutrition can go back into the bulb. But of course the main story at the moment is tulips. And I didn't plant any tulips last autumn. So all the tulips you see here, and there aren't that many, are tulips which have come back year after year. And tulips are not great bulbs for coming back year after year, but one thing you can do to increase the number that comes back is to plant them very deep, like about 12 inches deep. And this also stops the squirrels from digging them up. The Darwin tulips come up better year after year, and I think some of these lovely pinky, peachy ones are probably Darwin varieties. And the pointed one here is called a burgundy tulip, and that's very similar to ballerina, which comes up very reliably year after year and comes out later in the year. Looking at other things in the garden, I realised I should have cut these grasses back at least a month ago. And it's funny how you can just look at something every day and yet somehow not see it. I don't know if you find this. Do let me know in the comments below. But I should have cut these back 3-4 weeks ago, but it won't harm me cutting them back now. I'll just avoid any new growth coming up through. They have got very congested in these pots, and ideally I should be pulling them out of the pots, cutting them in half and returning about half of them to the pot with some fresh compost. But it is quite difficult to get compost at the moment. I have bought some compost from a local nursery called Edible Culture near me in Faversham, and they're doing deliveries, but I don't think I want to use it up on such large pots. I know that many of us have been having problems sourcing plants and compost and other things we need for our garden. And of course, if you put a Google search on plants online, for example, then you get the big companies, and they are pretty overwhelmed at the moment. And so you might be better just trying your local garden centre, looking up a local garden centre and seeing if they're doing deliveries or mail order, or small specialist nurseries. And there's a blog post about that in the description below, because I think it's great to support local companies, and also they may just have more capacity, because the sad thing is that there are hundreds of thousands of plants all over the country which actually nobody can buy, and meanwhile people are longing to buy plants online. So getting plants to the people who want them is really quite difficult at the moment. Like many people, I've been trying to grow more veg this year, and I have had significant failures with veg in the past. I don't find veg growing as easy as I find flower growing, and I think this is not unusual. There are some important differences between growing veg and running a flower garden, and I've done a video on this. It's in the description below. But one of the most important things is the amount of time you need to take growing veg. It's not necessarily taking longer, but you do have to look at your veg every day or every other day. Whereas with a flower border, you can put in a couple of hours really good work one weekend, get it all straight, and then if you really didn't touch it for about another 3 or 4 weeks, maybe even 5, it will probably still look good, and you just can't do that with a veg patch. And the other thing is weeds. I'm pretty relaxed in the borders about weeds, and I love self-seeders. And you can see here that the leaves of the self-seeded alliums have just gone right over this border. That, as far as I'm concerned, they're covering up the soil, they're preventing annual weeds from growing, and the alliums will look gorgeous. But I can't be relaxed like this in the veg beds, I have realised, because veg are very hungry plants and they don't like competition. So I have put something called strulch over my beds this year. It's a kind of like a straw mulch, and I think you could probably get the same effect with perhaps a bark mulch. And the idea is that I'm blocking the light from annual weed seeds. I've only had it down 2 weeks, but certainly no annual weeds have appeared where I have covered it with strulch. There are some on the corners where the strulch hasn't gone quite up to the edges, so I'm assuming that this is helping to suppress weeds. But in the end, popping out there every day, just pulling out anything that you see, not necessarily spending hours on your veg patch every day, just getting out there and just checking that everything's fine makes a big difference. Do let me know in the comments below what challenges you're having in your garden at the moment, and also what triumphs, because I'd love to hear about them. And if you're looking for ideas for smaller gardens, there's a garden design playlist at the end of this video, which is really worth having a look at, particularly some of the garden design on a budget ideas. And if you'd like more tips, ideas and inspiration for your middle-sized garden, then do subscribe to the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.